Hey, everybody, welcome to the SCIF, the Secure Containment Information Facility. We are locked down. I thought you were going to do it, then you didn't.
Such a like.
I thought you were going to do it. I was going to do it with you.
Yeah, this one's probably not going out to public.
Yeah. We're going to be talking about too much of the I word.
Unless we want the French palace coming after us, which could be fun. That could be fun.
Could be fun.
Could be fun.
Dude, okay, so if on your resume it says, was sued by Emmanuel Macron. Pretty awesome.
That's pretty good street cred for a podcast.
Sued by the LSA palace.
And French prison can't be that bad. I mean, think about it. You're probably eating a baguette a day, you know.
Well, that's
plenty of cigarettes.
Lots of wine.
well, that's actually how. So Candace, the LSA palace, has been going after Candace, but she's like, okay, bring it forward in a Tennessee court, like, because there's this, like, what are you gonna do
like,
about
it? Oh no, I can't go to France now.
Yeah.
I always wanted to go to that shithole called Paris.
Yeah. Italy's better anyway.
Well, it is interesting too, because like you probably saw the title, but we're talking about the Brigitte Macron stuff. But the two main journalists on it, the main dude who's probably the most like in depth, he has not actually been sued for defamation, but he is hiding out in Italy. He has moved away from Paris and he is living in Italy. The main chick in it who is being sued for defamation and has been hit for defamation charges on very small details, not the overall meat of the substance. That's important to note. She just got cancer, which is a quinky dink.
Very aggressive cancer?
That's a quinky dink, I will say.
Don't forget about the heart attack gun, guys. If they can do a heart attack gun, they probably have a cancer gun.
Fast-acting cancer is a 100% proven thing, like of initiated fast-acting cancer.
Is that like fast-acting and actin?
I don't know.
But for cancer.
But for cancer.
Yeah. You spray it in your socks and you get cancer. You get foot cancer.
Foot cancer.
Yeah. So going into this, like we've covered this in the past, like over a year ago. I did a dive into I read Xavier Poussard's entire document, which is just massive. I just read through it one day and I became pretty, I'm not necessarily convinced that she's a dude. Although I'm like 95% of the way there, it's more so.
At what percentage are you convinced?
I like to always have a healthy degree of skepticism.
5% likelihood she's got bottom surgery, or
I think that she's very likely Jean-Michel Trogneau, which is the brother of Brigitte Macron, in an identity crisis situation. But like it's just the thing that is for certain is. It's weird. Like there's just a lot of weird stuff and you have to jump to certain speculation, and it's intentionally obfuscated. Like the stories that come from her, from Macron, from the different documentaries and stuff, they all have different dates. Like they all have different dates on specific things. They have it's like intentional obfuscation with that type of like chaos tactic of like, it just kind of, everything is like, slightly off to the point where you're like, what's going on here?
Right. So, and since last year, the reason why we're talking about it again is a lot more has been done in developing this space. And then this week we had this really weird video came out of, well, you've probably seen it, Emmanuel Macron getting face pushed by his
We'll
wife.
play it right here.
What is that? Look at this.
That's so loud.
Yeah, here, I'll turn it down on my end.
I like the sound effect better though.
So she's just like, and we find out
double hand face push too.
Yeah, we find out that is Brigitte because they walk off together. But like his like realization that the door's open is hilarious.
And they walk out and it's like nothing happened.
There you go. Weather's pretty nice here. Hey, everybody.
Her shoulders are broader than his, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is that just the pads?
She is 40 or 36 years older than him, too, which is another interesting dynamic. And this is actually a thing is professional lip readers were looking at her mouth in that video, and they believe that what she was saying to him was in French, "Stay away, loser."
Oh,
I don't understand that.
Which is
like it's such a strange thing to say.
Also just strange. Like here's just a report on that. I had it up. I don't know why I pulled a secondary link. But
savage slap.
Yeah, Emmanuel Macron's wife in shock outburst after savage slap.
Was pretty savage.
So it's just kind of, it's a strange relationship.
Picture.
The freeze frame is choice.
Well, it's such a weird thing, like especially because their excuses they were being playful, but his face is one, not playful, two, Who pushes someone in the face? That's such a weird thing to do. Like if you push someone, you push them in like, you know, their upper body.
Yeah.
What the hell's that about? That's not playful.
I mean,
you don't playfully push someone in the face.
No. Was he? I don't even want to think about this. Was he like trying to kiss her, and she was like, "You? What do you think? What do you think? I'm gay?"
You know what's actually really interesting. Something that's really interesting about this, and I'll get into some of the zoomed out picture of what the conspiracy theory is here. Mm-hmm. But one of the aspects, just speaking of that, is Macron in his autobiography. He writes a lot about his grandma, and his grandma would share his her favorite books with him.
Not what I thought you were going to say.
Well, just wait, and it might get there.
Okay.
She would share her favorite books with him, and some of the authors of those books, pedophile past, we'll just say, and were involved in this like tranny and gay relationship with each other, kind of thing.
Like the authors were involved.
Yeah, with this? Which is just kind of weird. Where like one, looking back, one is now argued to have been transgender and the other homosexual. And there were these kind of famous like French authors, people we wouldn't know, but like French authors, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Not a lot of French authors besides like Camus breaks out of France necessarily to America. So we don't know those names. But it's just kind of like, and in his like office, those books are right front and center. You know, like it's just kind of interesting.
Childhood books whose authors were gay.
Well, and there's a lot of like pedo style like stuff. Like they're like fantasy books or something in that nature. And there's like a lot of pedo stuff that's kind of
in the books,
which is kind of the thing. So like right now, without even getting into the conspiracy side of this, the weird part of the relationship here is that she was a 40-year-old teacher and he was a 14-year-old student when their relationship started.
Sounds like French.
Like this is where the age of consent was 16, I believe in French. So like they're even below that. So like she is a pedophile by like legal definition, right? Like just off rip, it's already kind of strange. It's odd, we could say, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it is strange. You can't go by that without saying how they could become the president of France without that being investigated. Right? Like it's a strange thing that the corporate press would so cover for something of that nature for the president. That's some shady financier flying, scientists and rich people around, but the guy running for president.
Yeah. A public figure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the big thing, because when he was running for office, there was this mythology that was created. We kind of talk about mythologies being created around public figures all the time. Mm-hmm. It's actually like, I looked at coverage of, say, like Kamala Harris's autobiography when she was running for president. I didn't read the book, but I like saw other people's coverage of it. And it has kind of like the same types of themes around. I'm not saying like she's a pedo or anything, but it has like these themes where hyperfixates on very particular people of the family, don't talk about other people of the family, really try to like pull up the black side of the family and not talk about the Indian side of the family.
It's and narrative shaping.
And there's like figures in her life that are also very interesting, where you're kind of like, you look at it with a glance and you're like, this feels kind of Manchurian in a sense. In the sense of like, it feels like you were selected in a weird way. Like I don't really, like there's like those vibes that exist there.
People will totally believe that with J.D. Vance. Yeah. They'll be like, oh, J.D. Vance was cultivated by Peter Thiel, and he's just artificial candidate that was made up in the left-wing space that's conspiracizing about the right. They'll do that all the time with no compunctions whatsoever.
Obama had the same feels. It's actually kind of funny looking back at like the birther phenomenon with Trump, looking back on that. Which like that in its own stuff is like, you're kind of like, was Trump onto something there? Just because like there's a lot of weird, shady stuff in Obama's past.
There is.
You're just like, and there's a lot of obfuscation that exists there, and key figures that are like important figures in the overall dynamic. You're just like, what is going on here?
I will never forget in 2009 being in college, and they're discussing politics and stuff like that. Girl puts up her hands, just like, what are you talking about? He grew up in Chicago. Like he wouldn't be, and she's thinking to the guys from like Southie, right? And it was like, no, he grew up in Hawaii with his banker parents in a wealthy neighborhood. That's what happened, right? Like you just don't know anything about the president's background because you didn't read the book, It's and then of course his book really de-emphasizes that part, and you got to go to, actual third parties to get any kind of truth.
Well, and that's the thing here. So when Macron was running, the press front ran a lot of this talk, and one straight up lie. Like he was 16 at the time is what they would say, but it turns out he was actually 14. He'd like just turning 15 when they first met and stuff like that. But they mythologized this love story around Brigitte and him, and making her seem like this like hot model bombshell. She's kind of a party girl, but she like wears mini skirts and goes to and teaches classes in like her blazer and her mini skirt, and like she's like this hot bombshell. Like this is like here's some quotes from the French press I pulled. Brigitte's class can't believe that, and some of these are like anonymous quotes from her students and stuff like that. Which is
anonymous quotes,
interesting
right?
As well.
I'm really worried about coming out in public to say the first lady's hot when she was young. I don't understand.
Brigitte's class can't believe that the French teacher is celebrating her 40th birthday today. She looks so young in a short skirt and casual manner to capture the attention of the most dissipated. The teacher has another less academic asset, her legs showcased in tiny skirts. Brigitte didn't wait to become the first lady to take care of her appearance. She was a pleasure to look at, not just to listen to, always with perfect hairdressing and makeup and performed, one student recalls. The boys are seduced. The girls take her as a role model. All the students were in love with her, another student said. Some other paraphrasings I pulled was quotes from teachers saying she showed up wearing miniskirts and female sports jackets looking hot. Like essentially the magazines were trying to paint this picture of like teenage boy gets the hot teacher of his dreams, and it turned into this love story. And there's a feminist spin to this where it's like, you see, look at Donald Trump. He has a 30-year difference between him and Melania. Why can't it be the same way? It was like the thing is that this is actually more pedophilic than that. Yeah, right. Like they're adults. He was 14. There's a little bit more to it, right?
Right. For Hot for Teacher is a song in America, right? And we can understand that, but it's also something that we as a culture kind of contend with, like but we don't really like that. You should be learning. You shouldn't actually be hot for teacher. Well, right? We have a contentious relationship with that.
I want to pull up for you Exhibit A of Hot for Teacher.
Buzz, your girlfriend.
That's the hot sports jacket we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like she wasn't this like bombshell model, and here's him playing Scarecrow in the play, to which she was like a drama teacher for. This is them in a loving embrace.
Can you zoom in on that a little bit?
Which
on the right, on the loving embrace. Yeah,
she doesn't look super hot.
I'm not catching it.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that's kind of the mythology as presented to us.
Okay, wait a minute. I have a question. Was it an all boys school in a monastery someplace?
No.
Because then you could
only way.
Yeah. So the only way.
No. La Providence was not a boys only school.
Was it a prison?
Well, so here's some other stuff too. So like there was a Brigitte Macron biography that talks, because even like the mainstream press wanted to paint this picture of her. Like they wanted to elevate her in such a way. So you had like mainstream journalists trying to dig into her. Like, let's get to know who she was before she was 40. And this is a quote from Virgine Linhart, who was the lead on the documentary on her, which was produced by a state-run media company. So this is all like under the apparatus of the palace. This is a quote from her. "It's difficult to investigate Brigitte Macron, much more than I imagined, on the substance, on the form, on everything. As soon as I started making contacts, I was summoned by Brigitte's chiefs of staff. It was almost like a police interrogation. What do I want to show? Who will I be interviewing? I made a list of people I wanted to meet but could not apply. The interviewees, apart from her formal students, all had the authorization of the Élysée Palace and were very careful about what they said. There's a thick wall of silence. The level of control and checking is, well, quite astounding. The documentary is a 90-minute, very personal portrait. For it, I needed photographs of young Brigitte Macron, small children. That would show an itinerary, not those approved by the Best Image Agency. I'll get into the Best Image Agency. What won't be released is anything to do with her former life. It's a total blackout."
So why would you want a total blackout? Like, if everything was straight up, right? Why wouldn't you be like, here's all the great stuff we have? As a candidate, that's your incentive, right? Is to project an image, like a comprehensive image, right?
Right. Like the JD Vance memes. You know, fat JD. It's a really endearing part of his story. We need.
Instead, we have Sports Illustrated models and like French press putting her like in bikinis and shit like that, or like swimsuit model Brigitte stuff.
With photoshopping
and that's so. I said I would get into Best Image because there's this company called the Best Image Agency, which is this French company. It's run by this woman named Michelle Marchand. Her nickname is Mimi, and she is designated her kind of moniker in the French press is that she is the Pope of the French press.
Weird.
Okay.
And so she is this former lesbian nightclub owner.
Very Pope-like.
Who went on to found a bunch of paparazzi companies, eventually settling on Best Image Agency, which is a celebrity photo company. And the Macrons gave her exclusive rights to their private images. So all images of them have to go through the Best Image Agency. She became their PR person. And she's also, by the way, just married to a French intelligence officer.
Imagine that.
Wait.
Throw that in there.
She's lesbian married to a French.
She ran lesbian nightclubs. She's not lesbian herself.
Okay. All right.
The French get a little wild.
All right. Lesbian nightclubs.
So here's some sketchy.
Married to a French intelligence.
Here's some sketchy. This woman. She's a very important like propaganda side. Like she controls French media in a lot of ways. Like she had up until a falling out with the Macrons a few years ago, which we'll also get into. So some sketchy events of her past: forging marriage licenses, forging interviews for her magazines, and the like. She did PR for and had a close relationship with the CEO of Elite Model Management while they were going through a little crime of sexually abusing minors and pimping out people to various Saudi harems.
Whoa! What?
Yeah. One such model was given to become the harem wife of Adnan Khashoggi, the billionaire. The billionaire arms trader.
Yeah, connected to Epstein.
And also like the uncle of the journalist that was killed, but and that whole story we're supposed to really care about.
Jamal Khashoggi.
Yeah. So there's an interesting connection.
So we have Epstein ties here.
It's one big soup.
Elite circles all know each other. This is an international, set of European and American elites, right?
Sure.
She provided support.
Pedophile elites, apparently.
Well, this is in the 1990s, right? They're all running around the same.
What? It was a different time?
No. I'm not justifying it.
That's the Rothschilds' argument on the incest. Oh my God. I want to get into the Rothschild stuff later too.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like,
we changed with the times. That's what they say. You're like, did you? Like they themselves say that they changed with the time. Like this was
they admit our past with that sort of thing.
Of 5 centuries of like this banking cartel. So she was involved. I'm not done with this woman's sketchy past.
Okay.
She provided support to the Benalla affair. This is another thing I learned about that I didn't even realize. There's this guy Alexandre Benalla who was basically groomed up by the Macrons as their head of security in his early 20s, and then became their deputy chief of staff. They go on vacations together. He's like an adopted kid almost, and he moved into the palace. He's only 33 years old right now. Has had a crazy career. He in 2018 was caught impersonating a police officer during the May Day demonstrations and was beating protesters in the street. And there's a video of him.
Whoa.
He was dressed in police uniform beating protesters. This is the deputy chief of staff of the Macrons who lives in the palace. Like here, I'll pull his wiki up actually. Like he's like a young dude.
He looks like a psychopath.
Wow.
Yeah, like impersonating, like right. It's all here. Like this, you can just find this on the Wikipedia article.
How did that happen? If he got in trouble with it, did they reveal how he wound up in that situation?
So he got fired for this, but then it turned out he was still doing diplomatic work for the Macrons. Still had diplomatic passports, so he had free travel around. And he was he got embroiled with, I think it was in Libyan diplomacy.
Makes sense.
And it was later revealed that he was financially tied to 2 Russian oligarch mob bosses. So some other connection going on there that I don't know much of the story beyond that. That's kind of like where it's left off. So and she was she was providing financial and like financial support for his travels abroad during this time. This Mimi person who's like close friends with the Macrons.
Okay. And wait a minute. So he was like a child of Macron's, became chief of staff.
Adopted.
He's connected to Mimi through the Macrons, I assume. Where did he come from before he was in all these things? He just kind of comes out of nowhere.
He became their head of security, and then eventually became and then at 25 years old became their deputy chief of staff, and moved into the palace.
Whoa.
So
and then one day he just like dressed up a police officer to go beat people on the streets and got fired.
Which kind of makes you feel like it's like a inside job, like FBI in Jan 6 type of situation.
Yeah.
Like it makes you feel that there's something going on there.
Or it's just like a psycho, and he was just like, I want to go beat people up. And I'm going to impersonate a cop so I can do it.
Here's other stuff with this chick. She's charged with influencing witnesses and forming a criminal organization in the efforts to force the retractions of statements from a major businessman in regards to the Libyans financing the 2007 election in France, because she was also very close with Nicolas Sarkozy, which is kind of like the Macron before Macron, like a decade earlier. She's charged with receiving stolen goods and breach of professional secrecy in regards to a Paris mayor candidate basically pulling an Anthony Weiner. Dick pics to women and stuff like that.
She was trying to manage that crisis communication.
No, her paparazzi outlet she was like in some sort of agreement of keeping secrecy, and she violated the contract on it.
Oh, she betrayed him.
Yeah.
Oh my God, really? Whoa.
And then she's currently right now on trial for blackmailing a TV host, demanding money in exchange for not releasing compromising photos of her daughter. This is the Pope of the French press.
Wow. Okay, so you're getting major mob boss vibes.
Well, and here's kind of where Mimi is currently at. She has had a falling out with the Macrons, and she has written a biography called Mimi, where she gives various nods to the Brigitte conspiracy.
Really?
Whoa. Okay.
So if anybody would know, it seems like she would know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she's not going to reveal it because that cuts off all of her access and
the blackmail leverage.
Right.
Yep.
Wow.
Mimi.
And there's French intelligence ties. There's all this stuff, right? It's kind of odd, kind of odd around it. Mm-hmm. So maybe let's get into what is the conspiracy.
So we have a mental model that everything is cartels and mobs all the way down, right?
Gay or CIA
all the way down. This conspiracy theory matches that model really well, right? And but it plays it out on such a grand scale, it becomes harder to believe because it's so grand, right? That's how I'm thinking about it. Am I right about that? Is that?
Yeah, and very in particular, the this is a family name that gets thrown around in conspiracy circles, and they're kind of like obfuscated in America because like they're more of a European thing. Is the Rothschilds? There's very direct connection to the Rothschilds via the Macrons. Like just a very direct connection, and I can get into that too.
Let's do it.
And it's one of these things where the Rothschilds have had substantial power for the last 250-ish years as like a banking cartel. They've been prominent for about 500 years, and just starting off, Macron himself, he worked directly for the Rothschild Bank. Like he worked there, and all of his employees underneath there were all extremely confused by his rise to power. Actually, let me get into that right now. Actually,
yeah.
Let me just find my
While
notes.
you're doing that, so Rothschild is the R word that I referenced in the
yes,
yes.
It wasn't retard. Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, let me paint the picture of Macron, because I think the whole picture is kind of interesting. So growing up, he allegedly grew up in Amiens, France, which strangely is also where Brigitte Macron grew up. Although strangely, there's Rothschild bank records that say he was born in Paris. So there's already weird data.
Wait, whose records?
The Rothschild bank records.
Their records say he was born in Paris.
Yeah,
weird.
Say he was born in Paris.
Why do they have their birthplace in their employment records?
Yeah. I don't know. But it was just a strange thing that I came across. It's just kind of like, well, that's unique. He grew up, his father was a psychiatrist. His mother was in pediatrics. She served as a medical advisor to the Social Security office. Strangely enough, a focus of her work was intersex hermaphroditism, does a bunch of specialty work assisting gender sex transitions, and involved in the changing of legal identification through the Social Security office for people who transitioned. Kind of sus. A little sus. He has a bunch of full siblings from them, parents divorced, resulting in a few half siblings. He has an autobiography, which strangely, he only really talks about his grandma. That's where the book thing came up. He has there's this funny story in the biography too, where he says, like Amiens is in northern France, so it's up by the Pyrenees Mountains. And he talks about like how, he gives a story to like an interviewer. Like he's just kind of like fabricating the story on the spot, really, where he talks about like my grandma, she speaks Pyrenees, and I always dreamed of going down and giving her a proper education so she could speak proper French. Pyrenees isn't a language.
It's like, I've never heard of
Is it a form of French?
No. It's not a language.
It's not a dialect of French.
No, there's other languages that exist. Pyrenees is not one of them.
So is this like a Joe Biden thing, where he's just like, I was magna cum laude, in law school?
Yeah, just like speaking to an interview. It's also weird. The mayor of Amiens, French, says that he's not even from that town, but he's from a different beach town. Which is also just weird.
Yeah.
His fellow students say that he was kind of mysterious. He didn't have close friends, and he was chameleon-like. The mythology says that he was a boy genius, wrote novels that he never published, and he's a prolific writer. And he would write them for Brigitte Macron and things like these are the...
Okay.
So then he goes to this ENA. It's the École Nationale d'Administration School. It's this prestigious French school where... it's kind of like the elite of the elite technocrats go to. It's like technocratic culture is bred in there in French.
So you're thinking like Princeton, Harvard, that sort of place?
Yeah, and state funded. It's a state funded school. It's like this graduate program, national program.
UCLA then.
Like if you're an elite French finance person, you have to go through the school. Like it's like a requirement for like your resume. He was allowed in without having to ever do an oral exam, which is non-traditional.
So we did a different oral exam.
Hey.
That was the joke I thought of when I wrote that. And he gained top ranking in his class. Strangely, the students revolted because they knew Macron was too dumb for this to be true. The council of the state had to intervene and cancel the school's ranking system that year. Macron, when he was president, abolished the program in 2021, saying that it wasn't diverse enough. So that it's no longer a school.
He abolished the school that he went to.
They created a bunch more schools in the aftermath of it, where it's like now we can have like diversity of thought for this stuff. And
is the underlying theory that he did this to cover his tracks?
It's curious.
Yeah,
certainly curious.
It's certainly curious. And then so coming out of that program, he then got a job at the Rothschild Bank. And a lot of this is coming from interviews of people that he worked with. He was identified as having high contacts and was very, very well connected with the state. Was given privilege to bypass hierarchies. He was directly connected to David Rothschild and will often be get called into his bank or into his office. He has
the oral exams.
The oral exams. Has a reputation of never having written an equation.
Never. Wait, what?
He became a managing partner, by the way, the youngest in the bank's history, without ever knowing what EBITDA means, earnings before interest and tax. So curious.
Yeah.
Like it's curious.
Curiouser and curiouser.
Yeah. It's just, it's one of those things where there's just a lot of coincidences that exist here.
Right. So you could stipulate that this is just people who didn't like him, criticizing him. People who are envious, sour grapes, that sort of thing.
You could.
But also, does it vibe check? Right? Does he seem like a genius who's both an author and a financial genius and all these things? Is that likely? I don't know. You're kind of left with maybe publish like some writings from him so we can find out, like,
was he this prolific writer that just didn't publish his works?
Yeah, right. It's very much all things that aren't provable on their side.
And then that's where we get into the Brigitte side of this too. So like that's the Macron side of this.
Yeah.
The Brigitte side of this is even stranger. So we kind of covered that she doesn't have a history for 40 years before she started a relationship with this young man that played the Scarecrow in her play.
He just kind of comes out of nowhere as a teacher with no background.
And even like the mainstream journalists that are trying to like give this like awesome feminist narrative of like she's going to be this feminist icon can't get into it too.
Yeah, isn't it like that's worst feminist weird. Icon type narrative? She's romantically involved with a student. That's not feminism, right? Is that feminism?
Well,
now?
It's female empowerment. It's empowerment.
It's empowerment.
If women can be 3 decades apart, or if men can be 3 decades apart, so can women. Like in the inverse track. That's like the way that they.
Yeah, but once again, but it's a pedo shit, right? That's a different thing, right? I mean,
well, let's not get bogged down in the details here.
So what is the theory on what she was doing before she was 40?
So she was born allegedly as Brigitte Macron. There is a Brigitte Macron that existed in the records. To this. Could you
go back to the other?
To this chocolate family. Like Willy Wonka's style chocolate family. Where they had a bunch of kids. They had
wait, Willy Wonka's what?
Chocolate family. Like they're like a chocolate family. They have a chocolate shop. They have a bunch of chocolate shops and stuff like that in Amiens, France.
Sure.
Where in a big family, a bunch of siblings, and so on. She becomes how do I start this? The theory. So she just kind of disappears. Like the actual Brigitte Macron, there's not really any record of her beyond. They tried to put forward an image here. Let me just pull up this image here. They tried to put forward. Where did I put that? They tried to put some images, and these came from Best Image. So Mimi, the Pope of the thing. Where did I pull this? This is the problem with having 16 pages worth of notes.
Can I just give some chocolate background?
Yeah, give some chocolate background.
Okay, so during in the 16th and 17th century, France became known as a major chocolate importer via colonialism. So imagine for a moment the family dynamic of having kind of exclusive royal access to chocolate and the kind of networks that might put your family into. That might kind of contextualize out a little bit of this. I wouldn't think that this is old money phenomena by 1945. This isn't like Carnegie and like the American experience of like new money coming in to disrupt old money. This is much more of the been around since late feudalism money.
Interesting.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the Rothschilds.
The R word, yes.
So this is the family right here. This is who we are told is the first lady, is this girl on the lap. She's the youngest daughter. Mm-hmm. Now, the conspiracy theory is that who is the first lady is actually this kid, Jean-Michel Trogneau. And this is the thing where we actually have a history on this kid, and he kind of just disappears before the relationship sparks between Brigitte and Emmanuel. We know that this kid went to a Jesuit school. We know that he went and did military service in Algiers. We know that he was the best man at Brigitte Macron's wedding in Algiers. That's the only thing that we have on any record of Brigitte Macron is her first husband in Algiers. That's like literally the only thing we have of her.
Okay, so I'm confused. If he's supposedly Brigitte Macron, how was he the best man in her wedding?
This is where it gets kind of weird. So and this is where her first husband is allegedly like his friend from their time in Algiers. And that's her first husband. It's this guy named André Louis Ozier. He's nicknamed in the conspiracies Andre the Ghost because he kind of also just disappears. The official story is that, and this is true, is that he was a banker. And he got screwed over by a 15-year-old student who stole his wife. They had 3 kids, 2 daughters, 1 son. The youngest daughter is fairly public about being like in defending Brigitte from these conspiracies. So, but he's just gone. There's an image that I have here from their wedding. Now, I'm going to get into the facial recognition software here because the Chinese facial recognition software suggests that this is not Brigitte Macron. But this is apparently, and that this is not Andre. So it's like...
So there's just some random family.
Well, the thing is, it suggests that it's not the current Brigitte Macron. That's the thing where this gets weird. And I am going to pull. So what Xavier Poussard did is that he is using Face++, which is the premier facial recognition software used for the Chinese credit score system, like $1 billion company. And he pulls together, and it's important to know, he has not been sued like all of the other people have been sued because he's using technology. So what we have here are these images. So this is a photo of a young Jean-Michel Trogneau and the current Brigitte Macron. They look at it. 70% means high likelihood, very high likelihood. Like I have images here of other famous people up here, like Hillary Clinton. She's 78%. You have like all these famous people, and it shows like some are even down to 60% of like their childhood photos to them, right? This is the Chinese facial recognition software. We look at the woman in the marriage there. It goes down to 50%, 40% of likelihood. This is like,
and that's based upon like the algorithm making an association between the eyes, the facial lines, the smile, the teeth, all those things.
Exactly.
Interesting. Well, I mean, if you look at it, it's kind of intuitive too. I mean, look at the smile difference.
Yeah, zoom in on the left.
Well, and that's actually another thing. Is
like the smile mouth shape is so different.
That's another thing. Is a lot of these photos provided by the family are clearly doctored, and I will show you that too. Like they fix the kid's mouth to make it look like like there's like
another mouth put on top.
Look at this image. He's got like gaps in his teeth, right?
Yeah.
But then there's other ones where the kid does not have gaps in his teeth, right? There's like weird stuff like that. That's also part of this. I want to pull. Here's the brother at 18 years old versus Brigitte Macron.
Oof.
Yikes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you spend enough time on the internet, you can believe that.
Here is
you know what I'm talking about.
This is another one of the very few images that have been provided by the family of her doing like communal stuff at church, kind of a thing. The image that they provide are not really matches. There's like 163% there, but a lot of these are 40%. And a lot of people believe that this is actually one of the daughters, like one of her alleged
right, because that's the picture that they put into black and white to try to pass off, and then was discovered that is
originally color.
Yeah.
Right. So like this is where some of this. Oh, and here's examples of the doctored images. I pulled. Let's pull this right here. If you look at this, like notice this is from that family photo that I showed, and this is from.
It's got to be a few years later though, just from the baby fat braces.
Loss. Yeah, I think he was like 8 at this time, and he's like 6 or like 5 or 6 at this time.
Yeah.
But also you look at her teeth then versus her teeth now.
Right.
So like there's been work done, you know, like there's a lot of clearly like teeth doctoring that's
there's
happening.
Something weird about the one on the right too. Those teeth don't look quite right.
Well, and I want to show you that exact
too sharp
image
for the rest of the image.
So there have been 2 different versions of that image that have been presented to the French press.
Interesting.
There's like the earlier one and a later one. And now there's a question of why. So here is the first one, is this. Regular thing. Oh, you're supposed to, but now here's the second one. And I want to see if you guys notice the difference of it. These are both coming from the French press.
It's far blurrier.
Yeah, blurrier.
It's blurrier, but look right here.
Lamp?
They removed the lamp.
No
Well,
lamp.
why did they remove the lamp?
The theory here is that they didn't want to draw. This is the second image that was presented in the press.
Yeah.
Like the very first time this family photo ever came, it was this image. The second time it came out, they removed the lamp. And the theory is they didn't want leftward shifting eyes. They wanted it to be focused on Brigitte in the center.
Which could have innocent enough motivations, I would say. You know, just from a composition standpoint.
It's worth remembering the images get presented from the family to Best Image, which is the Pope of the French press, who is known for doctoring images and documents and things like this, has a past around this. It's like she is a propagandist.
I want to note they did a terrible job. You see how the blur on the side of his head? Go back to the lamp image. Look how much crisper the edge of his hair is.
Also, look at this. Look at her hands. Look at this chick's hands.
Whoa.
Photoshopping hands with Photoshop is like the problem always. It's often how you catch Photoshop.
Did they fix that in the other one?
No.
Oh, they didn't fix that. That's just
But look at those. Look at her hands.
Yeah, what's going on?
What is going on there?
But
it looks like.
Why would you Photoshop her hand?
I don't know.
She was holding the gun in the original.
Everyone sit still.
Franz Gangster as fuck.
Right. So this is where things kind of get weird. Like there's something weird.
This is
that's
where
going.
they get weird.
Yeah, this is
weirder.
Things are kind of like there's something that is being hidden, right? Like that's the. I think that you should come away with like there's something clearly at work here.
Yeah.
Now, is it exactly that this is that this is the first lady, this kid right here, this dude? Now, that's a question that can be raised, and there's evidence that suggests it to me if you're putting pieces together. But like already, just in this photo itself, you're like something's off.
Yeah.
Right.
I just don't understand that could be severe. Like I need to control the narrative and change the picture for that. But why the hand? It doesn't make any sense, right? You just can't describe a motivation that isn't I'm trying to change something about people's understanding of the past.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. So tell me, okay, so how does it get weirder from here?
Well, do you have any questions that can maybe point my interest? Because I could go a few different routes from here.
Well, okay, so
things that you guys don't understand about
they're in Algiers. There's a record of a marriage. Record of children.
Record of him as like the brother as the best man at her marriage with this Andre.
Do we have a picture of him, the brother, at the wedding?
No, we don't.
That's a weird thing because normally there's a picture of the wedding party, right? That's a very common thing, particularly family.
You would think so.
Yeah, we don't have, and it's also I remember looking into some of this stuff too. Like a year ago, and there's this weird thing like that family. There's like spy connections that exist there. It's kind of weird.
I remember that.
Yeah, and there's like weird things with documents that happened with Algiers and stuff like this. And it's also like keep in mind this is right after the wars that were going on with French and Algiers. Like, so you have this kind of like post-World War II period, you have the French colonialization, you have like that type of dynamics that are going on, which makes things very messy. Records are not well kept. It's not the digital age, you know, like things just get very muddy in that standpoint. And if we look back to, I shouldn't have closed out of these. If we look back to the timeline here, these are the timelines that are presented by Xavier Poussard, like the main dude journalist. Here, so we go down to, things get even stranger when you get here into the 70s. So there's this thing where you have Veronique. There's this anonymous transgender person that does this interview where she's like blacked out and she's talking about her post-op surgery experience and stuff like that. And it was like a very famous interview at the time. at first it's kind of like, okay, what does it have to do with this? Eventually, in the 80s, there's documentation of Jean-Michel marrying a woman named Veronique Drew. And there's only paper evidence.
So wait, Jean-Michel is
the brother.
The brother marries. Whoa.
But so like at first you're just like, okay, they're just different names, whatever. Yeah. People have run AI software to check the voice patterns of Veronique in that interview that was blacked out. Uses all the same types of idioms that Brigitte uses in French. Like it'd be something you wouldn't be able to catch as like an English speaker looking at it, and has all like the same voice patterns. Like it puts to like a very similar match to Brigitte Macron.
And so she married a brother.
Well, so the theory here is that Jean-Michel at this point was not transitioned yet. Or maybe did at this point, was like transitioned or was like in kind of that process stage, married a woman and then kind of like assumed her identity. Like this is a guy with identity issues. Like he assumed the identity of his sister. He assumed the identity of Veronique. And Xavier Poussard, the journalist on here, he actually got on a phone call with this woman, had like a half-hour conversation, said it was extremely strange because there's somebody in the background like talking to her. There was a lot of things where he's trying to get like, hey, can you tell me about Jean-Michel, like all this stuff, your ex-husband? And she's like, I would have to check back with Brigitte about this. There's a lot of like, I can't talk about this unless I go through Brigitte. There's a lot of stuff where she was caught, she's caught faking marriage stuff on her taxes. She leaves out her second marriage, which would be Jean here, and sometimes leaves out her first marriage as well. She lied about going to living with her mother after the divorce, when the records show that the Trogneau family actually put her up in a house after the divorce. So like there's like, again, more weird obfuscation and coincidences that are happening around the structure of these families.
So let me step back. Jean-Michel, that kid, grows up, gets married, gets divorced, gets married again.
Has three kids with her, allegedly.
But she's trans. Because that's what the interview about Veronique. So where did the kids come from? Obviously, they're someone else's kids, right? Because they would both be biological men.
Well, this is where it gets really messy.
Yeah, right.
How all these kids work and come into the dynamic.
He talks to Veronique, who is a trans person.
Well, she's not trans. This is not like this. Veronique is not the same Veronique of this. The question is the belief is that the current Brigitte Macron, who is believed to be Jean-Michel, is that person that was in the blacked out interview about their transitioning.
Whoa, so he's just like taking different identities over time.
And I've watched the interview. Like I've watched the interviews. Like it's like a TV host talking to this person who's blacked out. And I watched video footage of the AI software going through and making the match and stuff like that. And you're like, it's pretty compelling. It's one of those things where it's like compelling. Like they transmitted the voice of this trans person and Brigitte Macron. It's like they use the same phrasings. They use it's like speech patterns all exist, and the AI says that it's a very close match.
Okay, so the question that I have is like all this is so circuitous and strange and seems so easy to be caught doing because there are so many different little nuances and variables that could not add up, and they obviously don't. So why would they do this?
That's the question. And it's also like some of the what appears to be intentional obfuscation, and also just the legal arm of the palace coming down on people on this.
Well, and also imagine, the motive is something like the good life is one where you are able to define yourself, right? That's what the good life is, especially if you're wealthy, right? If you're coming from a wealthy chocolatier family with connections to the elite of Europe, you're like all the barriers that would normally be in other people's way are just inconveniences you pay to get over, right? So this person taking on multiple identities and potentially being in these situations or getting kids that they can claim are theirs because they want to have a family, those would all be things that you would just pay to get over, right? So these are just obstacles in the way that they never thought they would get accountability for because the information environment was so low back then. Now that we have so much more information environment abundance, people can go back and start pulling apart these strings. But back then it probably looked like, oh no, we're good.
Well, and that's what it feels like to me. And there's other stuff. Cause like, I think the next piece of the conspiracy theory that needs to be just further and further dug into is a lot of the Rothschild connection, but that's where a lot of things get very ambiguous. Because the more I dug into it and the more I felt through it, like my intuition sense, like there's like the logic stuff of what I'm seeing where I'm like, ooh, it's pretty damning. Like there's a lot of there on the conspiracy, but my intuition sense says that the Rothschild connection is hyper important. And it got me thinking about thinking about like political families and like very powerful families and how they, like, I know a lot about the Medicis and they fell out late 1700s, early 1800s, but they had a stranglehold on Italian politics and European politics as a whole for hundreds of years as a banking cartel. They had multiple popes. They had like 6 popes. And the Rothschilds are kind of the family that became the European banking cartel after that.
Yeah.
And then we have the connections, like David de Rothschild was front and center at Emmanuel Macron's inauguration. And there's this dynamic with the family where one of the reasons that the Medici family fell out was they stopped having competent male heirs. And all their women were getting married out to like royal families abroad in various European countries, and they kind of stopped being Medicis.
It diffused their
power and their brand and stuff like that.
Well, in the bloodline, the name fizzles out if you don't have boys, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, in the Rothschilds, they have a saying called "Vice is nice, but incest is best."
Now, is that a real quote?
Yeah, taken straight from a Rothschild woman. Like I have seen the clip. I have watched the clip. It is she said that. And there are plenty of books written about this in their history. And it's one of those things where you almost look at it, you're like, okay, you got this Rothschild banking cartel, and they're looking at what happened to the Medicis, and they're like, we got to preserve our women. We got to keep our women inside the structure. Like there's kind of that, which is like, you think back to dynasties and stuff like this is the type of stuff that they did. Now, and the Rothschilds say like that's a thing of our past, but when incest fell out of favor, we stopped doing that.
Yeah.
There's like, and there becomes this question of, did you stop doing that?
Yeah.
Did you actually stop doing that? And then there also becomes a question of like, where are all the Rothschilds? Are there crypto Rothschild branch families and things like that exist?
Yeah, that don't have the last name or the brand,
but are still part of the fraternal order that is being the Rothschild clan.
Right.
Right.
So is that kind of building the case that somehow Brigitte and Macron are related?
So this is where another piece of the puzzle comes in. Now, I don't know if this is directly Rothschild. Like, there's no real way to know if my intuition is telling me that they're both Rothschilds and they're doing some sort of incest game, like uncle nephew type of thing that's happening. It's like something like that. I don't know if it's true. It's just a theory.
But see, that sort of doesn't play with the other theory that they're having incest
part of the crypto,
keep the family going.
They're like part of like a crypto side branch or something like that.
Yeah, but there's
that's part of the general.
There's no
thing.
reproductive capacity in this relationship if they're both dudes.
But that's that like find your own happiness, get out there and you get the world is your oyster to manipulate the way you will.
But
and then you adopt the kids and you tell them
of a powerful banking family. The point is to continue the bloodline.
I think that it's like a branch family. Like it's like you have like the main family that is currently David de Rothschild, who's like in his 80s right now, and he's the head of the bank, which just by the way, like this is private banking. It's kind of outside of the normal structure of things where people go through and like run shadow banking through the Rothschilds. Like this is how these banking structures work. So like a lot of these things of like, track the money. It's hard to track the money because we don't have good data because they're not happening in like regulated markets where we can track the money. Like all of these things are obfuscated by shadow banks. This is kind of the argument of like in crypto, what Tether has become and is becoming is like it's becoming a thing of whitewashing stuff for shadow banking entities and stuff like that. Like that's kind of what the Rothschilds do. So, like they have individual relationships with like really important people and manage their money.
So it seems like we have a solid connection between Macron and Rothschild, but do we have one between Trogneau and Rothschild?
Well, so here's the connection. Here's the current thread on if they're related. Now, there's this thing where they're both from Amiens, France, coincidentally. Like, it has nothing to do with how they met or anything like that.
Rothschild and...
No, Brigitte and Emmanuel.
Oh, right. Like, they grew up in this...
The Trogneau family, well, they didn't grow up together
exactly.
because they're 40 years apart.
Yeah. But what I mean is, like, they're both from the same area, but they didn't know each other until high school, until she's teaching them in high school.
In a different town. Like that type of stuff. Yeah.
Kind of weird.
It's kind of weird. But, and this is like up in northern France, like up at the Pyrenees Mountains, like all this stuff.
Less populated up there.
Yeah. Like I've been up there in that region. So,
can I just make one note really quick? Mm-hmm. Odd that a school teacher becomes the first lady, right? Is that not weird?
That's the story. Feminist empowerment.
Yeah, but like, don't you think you got to kind of be like somewhat of a mover and shaker? Within these political families, especially if we're talking about like old European power dynamics, it's going to be somebody with some lineage that's got like some kind of authority, right?
You know what's also a weird thing here too is, and this is where it's like there might be some like aristocratic stuff that's going on with family traditions, is that both of these families have a history of doing like very specific naming traditions. In the Trogneau family, where Brigitte comes from, everybody's Jean something. Mm-hmm. Like everybody's like Jean Michel, Jean blah blah blah, all that stuff. So Emmanuel Macron's maternal uncle, his mother's brother, which we don't have any real record of. We don't have any. He's another person that's just disappeared, just not in the timeline. His name is Jean-Michel Nogues. Which is just like, they have the same name, which is like, of who people think Brigitte is the brother, who's Jean-Michel Trogneau. And there's a Jean-Michel Nogues who would be Emmanuel Macron's uncle. So let me just kind of go through this.
Joe's face.
It's just strange.
So there's a theory that he might be Brigitte.
That him and Jean-Michel Trogneau are the same person, who is Brigitte Macron, the current first lady. Not the old Brigitte Macron, like the real Brigitte Macron, but the current Brigitte Macron.
Something happened to that little girl at some point, and she's out of the picture.
Yeah.
And her identity's been taken by that dude.
Well, and so here is, it's kind of, so the Macron family were an atheist, non-religious family. When he was 12 years old, he decided to become baptized of his own accord. This is 2 years before he met Brigitte. He chose his uncle, Jean-Michel, to be his godfather. Strangely enough, he doesn't talk about Jean-Michel in his autobiography, where he talks a lot about his grandma giving him pedo books and stuff like that. Or he doesn't really talk about his siblings much. He talks about his grandma. That's like what he focuses on. Doesn't spend a whole lot of time focusing. Like, he talks a little bit about his parents and stuff like that, but like, he never talks about this uncle who he decided of his own accord to make his godfather when he became baptized when he was 12. Like, this was, his family's not religious. This is like the interesting thing about this.
Yeah.
Jean-Michel Nogues, that uncle, died 1 year, like on paper, died 1 year before Emmanuel and Brigitte got married. There's no available pictures of him. It's worth noting that his sister is the one that's like helping trans people with their new identities at the Social Security office.
Yeah.
Xavier Poussard, the main journalist here, was refused access to images of him when he went to the archives of the Faculty of Medicine, which is where he worked. So he was refused access to any images of him or anything like that. Which is also just interesting. He also would have lived there in Amiens in the same time that Jean-Michel Trogneau would have been there. Like, the timelines overlap. So there's a thought there that Emmanuel Macron's uncle might be the same person here.
Yeah. So you can see where there would be like a mechanism for doing this with the sister. You could see where there's people in the right place at the right time, kind of like the means to do it. Of course, Joe, you're kind of wondering what is the reason for this being the culture, other than that at some point in the 19th century, the family perhaps got very into the transgender stuff, right? And got very into that as a culture. So now they're trying to facilitate that without losing their bloodline, their ancestral connection to the family legacy, which is itself connected to the crown and the imperial holdings during the colonial period, where they got the cocoa beans to become a chocolate making factory. I mean, company. That's done through exclusive contracts through a corporate state partnership, right? So like the idea that this family could have somehow been connected to the Rothschilds is, possible, practical, but not, but obviously we don't have like the smoking gun there.
Yeah. Like that's the thing is like, there's a lot of these pieces where you're like, one, they're obfuscating something. There's a lot of pieces that don't make sense. There's a lot of corollaries that you're like, I can see a connection there. Yeah. So you kind of have to accept all of those things together and be like, there's something here.
Yeah.
Now is the current theory the correct theory? Or is the meat of the theory correct? And it's like, there's a lot to me. And I'm just kind of like, there's other things too. Like I didn't even get into in Mimi's biography, the Pope of the French press. She talks about, I guess she talked about Brigitte getting work done from this certain guy. And this certain guy is like this crazy prolific plastic surgeon who has these quotes of saying that the woman is the perfect body to mold, is like, as I can craft her and turn her into whatever she wants to be. And and he's like very big in like the trans scene and part of the transitionary stuff. And the Macron family gave him an award. And he wasn't even scheduled at the award ceremony to get an award. Like it's like very like there's like a lot of these things where you're like, what is happening here? Like what's going on? Who are these people?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's a question of like, who are these people? And it comes down to like, and this is Candace's theory, and this is where I'm getting, and I think she's kind of in the same angle of like there's some sort of Rothschild thing going on that she's not quite clear on, but like there's something there. Is like it's Manchurian Candidate type of stuff, where it's like molding people that are within the family in some capacity or controlled by the family, and we're controlling these people. And there's a question of, you have a bunch of these figures that are like him that have popped up in recent years that are kind of like, what is going on? Like, and they're all preaching the same stuff. They're all part of the same agenda. Like Macron is like a Nepo baby coming from the previous prime minister, or sorry, not Macron, Trudeau was a Nepo baby coming from the previous prime minister. But like he has the same vibe as Macron, this young, savvy, just kind of got everything handed to him, becomes this thing. Everybody's supposed to love him when he comes in, and then he kind of falls out of favor and everybody's like, oh, there was the prime minister in Ireland that resigned in shame like over a year ago, who was just like this gay half Indian dude that was like young and came up, was always a bureaucrat, was in the system type of stuff. Like it's those same types of people that just keep popping up everywhere. And like the manufacturing of a lot of our political candidates, whether it be Obama or Kamala Harris, like there's this Manchurian vibe that exists that you're just kind of like, what is happening there? Where you have like the counter there's like a different elite that are doing this counter push, which is like the Donald Trumps, the Elon Musks, the Peter Thiels, the like all of those types, where there's like this sort of like counter elite push that's going against those types of Manchurian like manufacturing.
Is it an old money, new money divide?
I don't know.
Like old Europe money versus the Trumpian new money, or feel really new money.
This is partly what I give when I gave my Europe thesis of what's going on, and I say that it's like New York mob bosses versus pedophile aristocrats. Yeah. Like that's kind of what I'm talking about, right? Like that's me kind of being goofy with it, but you're like, well, they're kind of pedophile aristocrat, like inbred aristocrats, right? Like that's kind of what they are. And that's historically what they've been. And we know they've been. And it's like, should we expect that they've changed? It's sort of like us being like, oh, the CIA did all these things in the past, but they're no longer doing those things. There's like,
they assure us.
Yeah. You're like, it's like the Rothschilds are saying like, yeah, there's incest in our history, like, but like it's fallen on foot. We don't do that anymore. It's like, have you? Yeah. Like, are you not doing that anymore?
Okay. And you're just left wondering, like, if you're wealthy like that and you've kind of partake in this culture and you have an ability to protect yourself from the taboo, right? Because when you're super duper wealthy, it kind of draws people into taboo, right? And so then if you're insulated because of all your wealth, we just be watching the collateral consequences of that in an environment where there wasn't as much to pierce the veil, and now there is. Right?
That's fair.
Is that just it? And we're just watching that kind of play out and discovering it again?
I think that's what like all of these different fragments. They're all like different fractals for the same thing that we're seeing on a big picture.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, we're exposing that. You're like, whoa, there's a lot of shady shit that's going down there. And you like keep pulling on it. You're like, whoa, this gets crazier and crazier. Like, I think this is another one of those things that we're seeing where you're like, wait, there's like these like cartel families that run like major powerful institutions, and they're like a family clan that, but like, or should we be surprised? That's how things used to operate.
Yeah,
you know
right,
what I mean?
right,
Like that's
right. How surprised should you be at this?
Yeah.
It's only surprising
Like
if
with secrecy, and
Yeah.
like they have like their like secret fraternal thing that's going on underneath it. You know, like there's that.
Right. So back in the early 2000s, this conversation, if it was the Bush family, would have been very mainstream.
When we looked at like Skull and Bones, like that's like a fraternal order. It's not necessarily like a nepotistic fraternal order, but it's like a fraternal order.
Well, it's a fraternal specifically connected to some powerful colleges and elite people
Yale,
and families that trace their way back to Prescott Bush and others that are related to, Nazi banking and banking in Germany. So was the Rothschilds. They came out of Germany from banking. So
and the Rothschilds are very, part and parcel of the is the Israeli state and everything that's going on with that. So like there's the Epstein connections that probably exist there. My understanding on the, I think it was Poussard, who actually, I want to finalize with one clip from Poussard in the Candace interview, who's the main journalist on this. I think he was talking about how there's a dynamic in France that I wasn't aware of geopolitically, where France's soft power efforts in Algeria and Morocco is that Algeria is way more connected specifically to China, and Morocco is way more specifically connected to Israel. And it is just very interesting watching. And he's been saying that there's been a shift that's been happening. There's been like a power balance, like dynamic push and pull with Macron between those two that's existed. And it's been kind of interesting seeing Macron's been slamming Israel lately, just like in the last few weeks, which is kind of interesting. So like, it's one of those things, I don't know what that means, but there's like something happening there, which is interesting.
Global change of opinion on Israel too. You got everyone even like Pierce Morgan suddenly coming out saying it's a genocide over there.
Who I suspect is MI6.
Right. Like, so something changed, and now you got the Wall Street Journal and New York Times writing about how Netanyahu needs to go. I mean, like things of
Trump denying meetings with like Bibi and stuff like that.
Or
like,
and like warning him on leaked phone calls not to mess with the Iran deal. I mean, there's a whole bunch going on there. So like you can kind of visualize it just on the level of these are a bunch of individual things that happened, or you could try to intuitively try to bring these together into an overall narrative that might be happening as world opinion is shifting amongst the elites that are.
It's a framework to have in the back of your mind. Some of the stuff. Right?
I wouldn't operate based upon that, but it's something to consider because it matches human behavior.
And it matches the past. It matches history.
It matches a lot of what we understand about history. Yeah.
I want to play one final clip here, and then we'll close out. We'll run a little bit long here, but I think so. This is Poussard here in an interview with Candace. It was part of her Becoming Brigitte. He's actually launching a book with Candace, or has launched a book with Candace on the Brigitte stuff. She's using it to like publicize his stuff on an American English level.
Nice.
And like he's hiding out in Italy. He's not in France anymore, which is another interesting, especially when we look at the France-Italy back and forths, like they don't get along anymore. Italy's like separating itself from the EU more and more. Like it's just kind of there's an interesting dynamic there. It almost makes me wonder if he's getting some like help from other factors.
The Italians promised to protect him.
Yeah, but I want to. This is him just kind of like laying out. She had asked him like, "Where is the Brigitte now?" But then he kind of goes into a little bit of kind of what we're talking about here. What he thinks is going on is like we're unraveling new things. There's an end of an era. So I hear.
This is the chief point that they don't want to unveil, the dark family secret, which is the case of identity theft and the abuse of a minor. Many journalists before me have asked, even one from Le Monde, and no member of the family has wished to respond. Phones are just being hung up. People are just not willing to speak about it. There's this interesting notion of consent. If you take someone's driver's license, even with their consent, it's still identity theft. But it's not a question of this consent. It's a question of a minor who cannot give consent. If you look at how extremely far-fetched all this is, in 2007, when she became Brigitte Macron, this happened under a false identity. This marriage of Brigitte Trogneau becoming Brigitte Macron is constructed on fraud, since Brigitte Trogneau was not the true identity. It was Jean-Michel Trogneau. The French have, in essence, placed in power a couple whose entire identity is based upon a fraudulent construct, forgery, pedophilia, and the abuse of a minor. When Vladimir Putin spoke of an empire of lies, this is what he meant. I mean, the Guinness Book of World Records couldn't beat how many lies have been told in this entire story. It's time we ask ourselves the question of young leaders. We've had this problem and questioning of morals of Obama in the US, Trudeau in Canada. Are these young leaders being engineered and controlled by blackmail?
I do think, and this is rather conclusively, that the world is...
Any thoughts on that? I want to play the thing right after this, too.
Well, it has been theorized on the internet, and I don't know how true it is, that Michelle Obama might be a man.
It is
breaking news.
No, it is one of those things where I'm like, with how much I've dug into the Brigitte thing and how much I'm like, there's a lot of there.
Yeah.
It makes you almost be like, what's going on with Michelle Obama?
Yeah, right.
Like, I've never looked into it, but it like makes you be like, what is going on there? Like, is the internet onto something?
Yeah, and there are things that people try to anchor these ideas around, and there are rebuttals, and I don't know what to believe. I'm just suggesting that, like,
I meme about it. I've never believed it, but it's one of those things where you're just like,
it's too funny not to.
Yeah.
I mean, but you if you see a pattern and you see this strange thing of people coming out of nowhere and all of a sudden being lifted up on the big corporate media stage as like, this is the new embodiment of all hope.
Obama was lifted out of nowhere. He gave like a big speech and was trotted out when he was very young at the DNC conference.
Right. But to undermine Hillary Clinton, who herself has specific connections going back to some old money from the South. So you wonder what's going on there. Like, it could be factionalization.
Yeah,
it could be lots of things. I mean, it's hard to know, but you just, you're seeing this pattern and people are intuiting the connections.
There's an interesting thing. Like, we covered the Bernie thing, the Bernie Flagrant podcast last ago. One of the questions, and we didn't talk about this, one of the questions they asked him was, or maybe we did talk about this, there's this like common trope among lefties who are disenfranchised with the left right now on the Democratic side, where they're like, the Democrats haven't had a real election since 2008.
Yes.
And there's almost this thing where you're like, was that even a real election? Now, there's been a lot of structural change that is like, it's even more fraudulent of elections now, or like more controlled elections, but like, it makes you wonder too.
Yeah, well, you wonder why the Democrat Party became a non-election having party, right? And that could be elite control.
Yeah, let's just play this final thing out, and then we'll give final thoughts, and we'll close.
Sort of waking up to this concept that leaders are selected and primed and groomed and sort of inserted into powerful positions. This has been a conversation that is now being had in America, even regarding Barack Obama, going backwards and realizing that a lot of what the public was told about his background didn't make any sense at all. And yet at the same time, they used the same mechanisms. They accused anybody that was prodding the narrative of being a racist. This is kind of the same thing with Brigitte Macron. Anybody that's prodding the narrative must be a misogynist or must be an ageist. It does seem like we are on a brink of a global awakening, and that's really thanks to, in America, free speech, independent journalism, being able to communicate as you and I have over X, and to establish communication and then to work with each other to expose bigger stories. But the obvious question that's going to be on everybody's mind watching this is, are you fearful for your life? Are you worried, given how much power the Macrons clearly have, given their willingness to use the Secret Service, their willingness to use the court systems, their willingness to use the law, to punish people for prodding into the story? Are you fearful that they could have you killed?
There's really an incredible aura surrounding this story. Very tragically, Natasha Ray has just been diagnosed with cancer, which she believes is due to the stress that this case has caused her and the stress the people surrounding this case have caused her. Her lawyer has recently lost guardianship of his children. The shareholder of my newspaper was targeted with a financial investigation and tax audit on all of his companies, and many influencers who have talked about this story were charged with cyberbullying. Friends tell me the police have questioned them upon their return after visiting me. I myself have not returned to France since 2021, since they came to my official residence, which was my parents' house. People came to that home in the middle of the night, knowing there was nothing there, and woke up my parents as sort of a scare tactic to them. The journalist from Le Monde who had met Natasha was followed by the Secret Service after that. So there's all these fear tactics that have been put in place, and we have to be careful. I do believe, however, on a positive note, that the power is crumbling. With the rise of BRICS and the election of Donald Trump, just as in the Second World War, we're almost at the end of an era. And at the moment, the beast is weakening, but that is also when it's at its most dangerous. These pockets of power are becoming smaller in London, Paris, and New York. I'm not afraid because I've done my work in earnest.
I'll pause it there. So
that's probably the strongest evidence that there's there is the response.
Yeah.
Right.
The more like, you know, she did like a whole six episode series, and I really recommend people watching this interview in particular with him. The more you look at it, you're just like, just the amount of sheer stuff that's coming from the palace is you're just like, something's happening. You know, it's just like
there's something there.
There's
right?
something
There's no
there.
reason to react that way unless there's something there. Because, like I've said before, if you do stuff to suppress people's voices on things like this, you make them louder. Because you cut out someone's tongue, everyone just wonders what he had to say. And this is what those are, right? I mean, it's so clearly that.
Well, and he has not been charged with any defamation stuff. Like all the, like Natasha Ray, the one that's mentioned, she got hit, and she got hit with very specific minor parts of her thing of like making a claim that wound up not being true. So like they're like being hyper fixated, and he's using much more of an analytical, like technological approach to a lot of this stuff. And he has yet to be hit, which is, that in itself is kind of interesting. So you're like, there's something about the meat of the entire thing. Natasha Ray got a few things wrong here or there, but like it wasn't the whole picture that she got wrong, that she got hit with the defamation. It was like very particular claims that she got hit with.
Or imagine if some influencer had gotten talked to by the FBI after, you know, some Michelle Obama meme. You know, that's the equivalent. Now we have
I just thought it looked like she had a dick.
Right.
I saw her dancing on Ellen, and those pants were doing some weird stuff.
I ain't seen no girl move like that before.
Very interesting stuff. Kyle, thank you for all your diligent research.
Was 16 pages of notes.
Everybody,
do watch the Candace stuff. They are really great. I mean, I've watched them. They're very interesting. It's hard to follow, but it's all there. I highly recommend it.
Absolutely.
It makes you question things. And that's the big thing, is it makes you be like, what is going on in this world? Like everything's not as it seems.
Red pills.
Indeed.
Break the matrix.
Thanks for watching, everybody. This has been The SCIF. We appreciate you for supporting the show. For David Rand, for Kyle Mack, I'm Joe Sheehan. We'll see you in the next one.
Peace.